Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to pull on a thread that connects massive geopolitical crises to, of all things, the price of your groceries. It's a pretty surprising link that starts in distant oil fields and ends right at the checkout counter.
So what connects a revolution to the price of corn? I know, it sounds like the start of a weird riddle, right? But it's exactly what happened back in 2011 when a revolution in North Africa actually sent food prices soaring thousands of miles away. Okay, let's get into it.
So picture this. It's Kenya 2011. In just 6 short months, the price of corn, a basic food staple for millions of people, it pretty much doubled. Now, sure, local things like a drought played a part, but they just couldn't explain a jump this huge. That leaves us with a real mystery. What was the real trigger?
To solve this, our investigation points to one prime suspect, the global oil market. And here's the crucial thing you need to understand. Not all oil price spikes are created equal. The reason why oil gets more expensive matters a lot, because each reason sets off a completely different chain reaction across the world.
We're looking at 2 main types of suspects here. First, you've got supply shocks. That's when the actual amount of oil available suddenly drops, usually because of a conflict or some disaster. Then you have demand shocks. That's when the world's appetite for oil just suddenly surges. So, which one was our culprit? All right, let's open up our first case file. We're going to look at 2 key moments in recent history where huge geopolitical events basically turned off the world's oil spigot, and we'll see exactly what happened next.
Our first case study, the 2011 Libyan Revolution. As the conflict got more intense, the country's oil production didn't just fall, it basically vanished. It collapsed by over 90%. Now, look at this timeline with me. In May, Libyan oil output hits rock bottom. Just 2 months later, in July, corn prices in Kenya hit their absolute peak. Wow. The timing is it's undeniable.
And this is where it gets really clear. When economists broke it all down, they figured out that about half, a full 50% of that massive price surge in Kenya was directly caused by the oil supply shock happening all the way over in Libya.
And believe it or not, the story doesn't end there. Just 1 year later, in 2012, the US and the EU put a heavy oil embargo on Iran because of its nuclear program. And boom, once again, a major political decision took a huge chunk of oil off the world market, creating a second supply shock.
Now, this slide is really interesting because it practically screams the answer at us. The price hikes in places like Kenya and Ethiopia were a little smaller this time around, but look at the cause. In every single one of these cases, over 70% of the price increase was driven by that one oil supply shock. The evidence is just overwhelming.
So, the case against supply shocks is looking pretty airtight, right? But, any good investigator has to rule out the other suspects. What about those demand shocks we mentioned earlier? Could they be the ones responsible? You see, in a place like the US, a big surge in oil demand can raise corn prices. And that's because of biofuels. When demand for oil is high, the demand for ethanol, a fuel made from corn, also shoots up. This creates a direct competition between using corn for food and using it for fuel, and that drives the price up. But does that connection even exist in Sub-Saharan Africa?
Well, the data delivers an absolute knockout blow to that theory. Sub-Saharan Africa produces less than 1% of the world's biofuels. Without a big food-to-fuel industry, the main way for an oil demand shock to mess with corn prices is just gone. So, case closed on that suspect.
Okay, so this brings us to our final, crucial question in this investigation. We know oil supply shocks are the culprit, but if it's not about biofuels, then how exactly does a conflict in North Africa make a bag of corn more expensive in East Africa? We need to find the smoking gun.
And that smoking gun, it turns out, is transportation. It's a really simple 4-step chain reaction, like dominoes falling. A global supply crisis means less fuel to go around, which makes prices at the local pump spike. That, in turn, makes it more expensive to run the trucks that carry everything, including the corn that has to get from rural farms to city markets. And the data confirms it, big time. During that 2011 crisis, transport costs in Kenya shot up by a staggering 20%. Now, compare that to an oil-exporting country like Nigeria, where the increase was much, much smaller. That massive difference? Well, that's the key to the whole puzzle.
So here's the bottom line, and it's exactly what the researchers found. In regions where farms are spread out and the roads can be tough, the price of fuel isn't just some small part of food costs, it's a massive part. Any shock to fuel prices immediately and directly hits the final food bill. So, Let's wrap this up and deliver the verdict. The link is undeniable. For many of the world's most vulnerable food markets, the stability of the global oil supply is a critical and often totally invisible factor in their food security.
And don't think for a second that this is just some interesting history lesson. No way. These same forces are at play right now. Projections show that a new supply shock, say from a new conflict somewhere, could spike corn prices by 25%. But it also works the other way. A global oil glut could actually lower food prices by almost 20%, just by making transportation cheaper. Which leaves us with a final and pretty urgent thought. If a conflict happening thousands of miles away can directly affect what a family can afford to eat, what do we do about it? Understanding this fragile global chain reaction is step one. But the next step is acting on it. Maybe by creating smarter policies like strategic fuel reserves that can act as a buffer, protecting local people from the fallout of a crisis happening halfway around the world.